In yesterday's episode, we followed the coordinates that Ulysses sent to our Pip-Boy through a canyon to the Divide. After reviving a clone of Ed E. from the bowels of the pre-war Hopeville missile silo, we finally got to hear Ulysses' voice. We spoke together at length, and we learned that Ulysses has become disillusioned by both the NCR and the Legion. He invited us to meet him deeper in the Divide, but in order to do so, we need to find a laser detonator to detonate miniature nuclear warheads that dot the landscape. Doing so will open up new pathways currently blocked by rubble, allowing us to reach Ulysses in the Divide. We find a path down the hill from the Hopeville missile silo that leads to a road traveling north and south. If we try to take the road south, we see that the southern passage is blocked in with rubble. Here we find a duffel bag and a dumpster to loot. We don't see a warhead we can detonate to clear this rubble, but let's keep it in mind. Who knows? It may lead somewhere. Instead, we turn around and head north. Along the way, we see a piece of wood with Ulysses' mark spray painted in white. In yesterday's episode, Ulysses told us that the colors of his marks will guide the way if we're intelligent enough to decipher what the colors mean. Well, let's see if we can figure this out. We see a big ruined house with a car leaning against it, but the road continues east and then southeast. Looking on our Pip-Boy, we see that the road bends around and goes south. It doesn't go all the way east, however, so let's go check out what's over here before we continue on our way. We find a large, easy locked gate, and upon unlocking it, we gain access to the Hopeville Missile Base loading station. In the loading station, we see a big stack of cars. We can use some of the nearby wreckage to leap down to another portion of the base, but we'll explore that in a minute. Instead, continuing south into the loading station, we see Ulysses' mark, but it's blue. What does blue mean? Maybe we'll figure out by looting some of these boxes. We see a bunch of crates and toolboxes lying on the ground. Inside one, we find another H&H nail gun, some nails, and Ulysses' log, Y17.5. If you remember from my Old World Blues video, Y17 was the name of one of the research labs in the Big Empty.
Back again. Left that crater behind. Got a few holotapes left. One's from the medical center. The woman, she fixed the recorder. Said it wouldn't last. Repayment for me, fixing her. She doesn't like debts. Can respect that. Payment enough. Just to hear someone who believes in the Brotherhood of Steel. Not Elijah. Different view. Same madness. She answered me on their philosophy, their way of seeing, the roads they walk. Dead ends. Empty. As if technology can solve anything. Big Empty's proof where that road leads. Just like the Divide. And all the roads that lead to it.
Y17 was the name of the medical center where the robots in the Big Empty had imprisoned Christine. Remember that Christine was the Circle of Steel assassin that the Brotherhood had sent to the Big Empty to assassinate Father Elijah. Ulysses rescued Christine from the medical facility, and then according to this holotape, she fixed a holotape recorder that she then gave to Ulysses. It is this holotape recorder from Christine that he's using to record these messages. We already learned in yesterday's video that Ulysses isn't too fond of the bull and the bear, the Legion and the NCR. It sounds like for a time, he thought that humanity's best hope lied with the Brotherhood. But after meeting Christine and learning about the Brotherhood's philosophy, it sounds like he believes the Brotherhood is not the answer after all. They just lust after technology. And technology, as he rightly says, is not the answer. The Divide is evidence of that. But what does he mean by that? What happened here in the Divide? Well, now we know what these blue marks mean. Looks like the blue ones lead to a secret cache containing a holotape or possibly some good loot. We find a few more of these boxes around the grounds and in the back of trucks. There's a small hut to the east, but we don't find a door inside. Instead, we can loot some boxes behind it. We find a trail of plasma mines leading from this building south along a concrete wall. The plasma mines lead us to a skeleton holding a Bowie knife, and nearby we can loot 2 more military crates. Above the corpse, high up on a ledge, we find a duffel bag that this person must have hidden. If we leap upon some crates behind the shack, we can hop up on top of it. Our reward is 2 bottles of Buff Out and a red toolbox. But we see that this is a dead end. There's a big concrete wall blocking our progress further west. We could jump down northeast, but I believe there was another path down there, and I don't want to miss anything, so instead, we'll retrace our steps back out the gate. Heading down the road, we can inspect this shack we passed earlier. There's a broken car leaning against it. We can use it like a ramp, and if we do, we find a metal box on top and a military crate. Hopping down, we see the first of one of the tiny nuclear warheads that Ulysses told us about. If we examine the warhead, we learn that this is an intact nuclear warhead. If what Ulysses said is true, the laser detonator in Hopeville should be able to trigger these to explode. Now, it doesn't look like this one is blocking our path, but perhaps if we detonate all of these, we can uncover hidden caches of goods. If we go around behind the shack, we can loot a toolbox and we find 2 ammo canisters. From here, we can fall down into a ditch if we're not careful, and if we do so, we discover the Hopeville Missile Base west entrance. We can walk along the fence back to the road. This is the entrance. But by falling into the ditch, we missed a gas station, so let's go over and explore that. But before we do, we get attacked. We see one of Ulysses' marks painted on a nearby rock, but it's red. This must be the mark indicating danger. What is being shot at us? The wind was thick, it was dark, it was hard to see, so instead of firing back, I just ran towards the gas station. If we head into the garage of the gas station, we find another one of those Ralphie posters. Upon activating it, we complete another step in the challenge, Feel Like a Kid Again. You'll notice that in this one, I had examined 18 of 20. I got most of these posters in my first run through, but I did miss a couple and had to go back for them. This was one of the ones I missed. There is a workshop in this garage, and a lot of scrap lying around, stim packs on the ground, as well as flamer fuel. We find a hard-locked floor safe in the corner. But I am under attack right now. I need to get to a good vantage point. So backtracking towards the Hopeville silo, we can shimmy along this rocky ledge on the other side of the fence. Here we find another military crate, and we see that the ledge overlooks the gas station. From here, we can simply leap atop the gas station. From the roof, we can leap on top of the carport, where we find a first aid kit, and it's here where the enemies across the way see us again. All I had at this point was my H&H nail gun. It's a silenced weapon, and I hoped I could snipe some of these guys, but I discovered that the spread on this thing is horrible. It's really only designed for close range. There's no way I'm gonna hit any of these enemies from this distance, so I had to get a new strategy. Heading down to the ground, instead of taking the road through the military base, we can go down into the other side of this drainage ditch. In one of the pipes, near to a skeleton, we find some steady and a duffel bag. And in the hand of the skeleton is a .357 Magnum revolver. And this was great news for my character. As you know, I spec'd into Cowboy with this character, which means I deal more damage using revolvers. At last I have a viable weapon to use. I tried to sneak around behind these wrecked buildings through a gap in a fence, but I'm just too big. I can't fit in there. Oh. So it looks like we have to go through this big hole. We see that the enemies trying to attack us are marked men hunters. Creeping behind one of these buildings, we see one through some rubble. But he found us. Okay, this little nail gun is pretty decent. Took a lot longer to kill than I was hoping for, though. And we went through so many nails, holy cow. On the corpse of this marked men scout was a flare gun. So this was the source of those big red flares he was shooting at us earlier. The flare gun is a new weapon in Lonesome Road. It's not supposed to be used for primary combat. Instead, if you hit an enemy with a flare, it does a little bit of damage and sets the enemy on fire. Its primary use, however, is to frighten abomination-type creatures. If you shoot a flare at an abomination, it'll flee. Abominations include Deathclaws, Centaurs, Night Stalkers, and Tunnelers. It is an energy pistol, so damage will be modified by your character's energy skill, but the base damage is 10 plus 1 over 10 seconds, with a DPS of 17.5. With the marked man dead, we find ourselves on a rooftop. Creeping up to the roof, we see that the marked man had turned this into a little bit of a home. We can loot some ammunition containers, a couple of military crates, but our goal right now is to get rid of the snipers on the nearby roof. I tried using this flare gun. I successfully managed to set this guy on fire, but I quickly realized that this flare gun doesn't do much damage, so running down and switching to my revolver, I ran around behind this building. I discovered that this building is called the Hopeville Missile Base Headquarters. One of the marked men had come down to the ground, so running back and around the corner, we can get him with our revolver. And now we're doing some real damage. These marked men carry some impressive weapons. I managed to loot a marksman carbine off this guy, which has a great little scope. With the snipers dead, we can now confidently go out to the main road. From here, we see the ramps that the marked men had used to reach the rooftops. 2 cars piled up on top of each other form a ramp to an adjacent rooftop. Here we find an ammunition canister, but it looks like Eddie and I caught the attention of another marked man. He began firing at us from the ground. Exploring this rooftop, we find a lip that goes all the way around. On the ledge, we can loot a red toolbox. We see that these ruins continue off to the southeast, and we pick up more marked men on our compass. But let's finish clearing this base first. On the main part of the roof, we find another ammo canister next to some concrete rubble. And next to it, we find a couple of rockets. That's it for this rooftop, so leaping on down, we can go back into the middle of the road. Here we find a metal box and some steady in a nearby dumpster, and we see that this headquarters overlooks the main military base. We'll go ahead and explore that next, but first, we need to head to the northeast to enter the headquarters. And just outside the big double doors, we see a horrible scene. A Nuka-Cola machine is toppled over on its face, but directly beneath it is a splayed-out human skeleton. This machine had crushed this poor person to death. We see one of Ulysses' blue marks on the door, which means there must be goodies inside. When ready, we can open the double doors to the Hopeville Missile Base headquarters. And if we're sneaky, we can use the opportunity to execute some sneak criticals. We see a door to the north, a hallway to the east, and a door to the southeast. Exploring to the southwest, we find a bookshelf, and at the very bottom, underneath a ruined book, we find a copy of Nikola Tesla and You. Heading through the southeastern doorway, we see a commissary on the wall. We can send Eddie to activate it. We can restock on ammunition and repair our new gear. I'm gonna go ahead and repair my revolver to do as much damage as I possibly can. Nearby, we find an auto dock. We can use this to heal on up and remove all rads. After looting a few containers in this room, we can head on out and loot the bodies of the marked men. On one, I found a brush gun. This is again excellent news for my character. Brush guns are another type of weapon that benefit from the cowboy perk. So I just found 2 of the primary weapons my character is spec'd into. On a nearby desktop, we find a copy of Salesman Weekly, and we can then go down the eastern hallway to inspect the bathrooms. Inside the men's restroom, we find some Mentats and Buff Out on the ground near to the toilet, and a first aid kit behind the door. After looting a Nuka-Cola machine in the hallway, we can go into the women's restroom, where we find a first aid kit on the ground, another .357 Magnum revolver on the floor. I'm going to save this for repairs, some .357 Magnum rounds in a sink, and some steady on the ground next to a toilet. The skeleton on the floor here has blood near the head. I think we can presume that this guy committed suicide with the revolver. When done, we can crouch down and head through the northern door to find ourselves in another hallway. Going down the hallway, there is a door to the left. Inside, we find a bunch of filing cabinets, no enemies. If we look to the northeast, we find another destroyed iBot beneath the desk. On the wreckage, we find iBot Upgrade Circuit Board. You have gained the Camaraderie perk rank 2, allowing Eddie to manufacture small energy cells or microfusion cells once per day. Hey, that's cool. I mean, I'm not an energy character, but if I was, I'd be really excited. With that, we've found 2 of the 5 upgrades for Eddie in the Divide, so we've got 3 more to go. After looting the various desks and containers in this room, we can head back to the hallway and go east. At the very end, we find another door to the left, which leads to a large vaulted room. The floor of the room above has collapsed down into this one. We find some psycho between a filing cabinet and the wreckage of the floor, and in the northeastern corner we find two safes stacked up on top of each other. The bottom one is open. We see whiskey, jet, and a suitcase spilling out. Inside the suitcase we find a silenced .22 caliber pistol. That nail gun is great, but we go through the ammo so quickly, I'm going to go ahead and take this in case I need to do any other stealth kills. The top safe is locked with a hard lock. Inside, we find the Hopeville base armory access codes. I wonder what that could be used for. Perhaps we'll find out when we go and explore the military base. And I found a .44 Magnum revolver. Well, things just keep getting better for yours truly. With that, we finish exploring the headquarters, and we can head back outside. We see that a big dust storm has kicked up while we've been inside. We're going to do one final sweep of this building to make sure we got absolutely everything, and I'm glad we did because on the rear of the building we find another Ralphie poster. Heading back out to the main road and going southeast, we see Ulysses' white mark on a box near to a gate. If red means danger and blue means special loot, white must mean this is the path forward. The gate is locked with an easy lock. After picking it, we can creep forward past a bunch of rubble. We can use this rubble as a ramp, which connects to the ruins of a nearby house. In these ruins, we find an ammunition box and we discover a marked men camp. There is a wrecked fire truck sticking out of the roof of this building, and we can use it as a ramp. Climbing on up, we can use our brush gun to pick off the marked men in the road below. Now at this point, we could have gone forward, but we bypassed the primary military base earlier. Ulysses' mark tells us that this is the way to go, so I'm going to backtrack and explore that military base to make sure I don't forget anything. Back at the western gate, we can go down into the primary military base. We see a bunch of buildings strewn all over. We'll go ahead and explore the perimeter first, starting counterclockwise. Heading southeast, we see that wrecked truck leading up to the loading bay we explored earlier. There's a small alleyway between two of these wrecked buildings, and on a big pile of rubble we find a metal box. Inside the box is the base service gate key. I'm betting this will be handy later. Using some of the rubble, we can climb up on top of one of these shacks and then leap across to the next one. All we find up here is a first aid kit. But from here, we get a great view of the base. We see a big stack of ruined cars to the east and a big pile of ruined cars leaning against the loading bay. Heading that way first, we can loot a few containers near to and inside the back of a truck and then head southeast until we find a door to the Hopeville men's barracks. We find that the barracks are occupied. With the marked men dead, we can get to looting. We find a duffel bag to the northeast next to a bunk bed, and an easy locked box next to this, filled with a whole bunch of stuff. There are a variety of other containers here, but notably, we find a sandbag barricade to the east. Behind it, we find some 20-gauge shotgun shells on the floor, mentats on a shelf behind it, and another commissary terminal. There's an ammo box right behind the barricade, and on a table just north of this are 3 MREs. There's more 20-gauge shotgun rounds and ammo canisters and duffel bags on the beds, near to the beds, as well as footlockers. There's a hard-locked locker right next to the bathroom, and inside, we find more U.S. Army combat armor. After having found 3 suits so far, the one I've got is nearly completely repaired. In the bathroom, hiding in a bucket, is 1 stim pack. And in the far western stall, hiding under a wooden box, is a copy of Tumblers Today. With that, we can exit back out to Hopeville through the northeastern door. Heading behind the barracks, we find a military crate with flamer fuel next to a fallen over broadcast tower. We see that this fell from a pedestal to the southeast. Next to the pedestal is a staircase going up to a ledge. On the ledge is a makeshift marked men camp. Here we find another military crate, an ammo box in a dumpster, and MREs at the bottom of a shelf. We can use the cot here to sleep if we want. But we've been discovered, and we're being attacked with grenades. On one of the marked men was a riot shotgun. This isn't a new weapon with the DLC, but it's an incredibly powerful one, and it'll come in quite handy later. Continuing to the southeast, we see a big break in the fence leading to a ruined building. Well, before we go that way, I want to finish exploring the military base. We see Ulysses' white mark near to a gate, and we can use the key we found in that box to unlock the gate. But again, before we go down that way, I want to finish exploring the base. Continuing around the perimeter, we find a big stack of cars next to Ulysses' red warning sign, and it's completely blocking this road. This is the Hopeville missile base east entrance. We see one of those nuclear warheads in the back of the truck. And perhaps we'll be able to clear all this rubble after detonating that warhead. To finish exploring the base, we head to the north. Here we find a very hard locked door leading to the Hopeville armory. However, just outside we find a terminal, and we can access it using the armory security codes we found in the headquarters. After unlocking it, we can open the door to the armory. The inside is a ruin, but we can go around in a clockwise fashion to loot absolutely everything. We find ammunition and ammo canisters on the ground to the southwest, a bunch of scrap and rocket canisters on a workbench to the west. There's a dead marked man pinned to a wall in here, which doesn't make much sense as this door has been locked for 200 years, unless this guy entered, relocked the door, and then killed himself. On the ground next to him is a duffel bag, and then we find a footlocker to the northeast. Next to this, on the ground beneath a desk, is a copy of Guns and Bullets. And finally, we find a locker to the east with a full suit of riot gear. This is great news for those who didn't have the cash to buy riot gear from the commissary back at the silo. On a shelf next to this locker, we find incendiary rockets, and rocket canisters. Against the western wall, we find a very hard-locked locker. This requires a lockpicking skill of 100 to pick. I'm almost there, but to push myself over, I went ahead and read a copy of Locksmith Reader. Inside, we find another full suit of riot gear and a riot shotgun. When done exploring, we can head back outside. We have two ways to proceed. We can go back to that ruined building overlooking the road, or we can go through the gate that we unlocked with the key that we found in that box. We'll continue for now by going through the gate to the east. By now, night has fallen, and the storm makes it hard to see. We see the road goes down east before us, but I don't want to walk out in the open, so instead I'm going to go south around all of this rubble. As we go around, we discover the marked men guard outpost. Crouching down, the night vision of the riot helm kicks in, which makes it a little hard to see when there's a big glowing fire nearby, but we'll have to do. We find a back door in this wrecked building, and big spatters of blood all over the place. I went forward through the main room and then upstairs just to make sure this building was clear before looting. And it was. We don't find anyone up here. To the southwest, we can loot an ammunition container. And then turning around and going to the north, we find another one on top of a bookshelf. On a nearby desk, we find more rocket canisters, and then a military shipping crate and an ammunition box in the northeastern corner. Before going back downstairs, if we peer through the wall to the south, we see some scaffolding just outside. Jumping on in, we find an ammunition box, and then on the wall of the building behind us, we find another Ralphie poster. This is one I initially missed, and I had to go back for. Heading back downstairs, we can go into the kitchen where we entered. There's a workshop in a room next to the kitchen. We find a copy of Fixin' Things on a workbench, and then a variety of boxes and crates. There's also a reloading bench here, but since we have Eddie with us, we're not really going to need it. And then we can loot some frag grenades on a shelf to the south. Heading out and moving east, we can go around to the eastern side of this building. Here we find a door to a basement. Creeping down, we don't find any enemies, but we do see A gruesome scene. We find gore and organs and chunks of flesh on every countertop and all over the floor. We see human skeletons hanging upside down with blood spatter on the wall and organs being collected in crates nearby. On the eastern wall, we find another Ralphie poster, number 3 of 20. In the northeastern corner, we find a service rifle and some 5.56mm ammunition. There's a first aid kit on the wall to the northwest, and then lying on a plate on the ground behind a table is a strange meat pie. These are rare in Fallout New Vegas, but we recall where we last saw one, we found a strange meat pie in Andale, in the Capital Wasteland. Our surroundings tells us what kind of meat is likely inside this strange meat pie. It looks like these marked men may also hunt each other, and not just for sport, but for food. After looting an ammunition box near to a stack of firewood to the southeast corner, we can head back up the stairs and leave this gruesome basement. From here, the only path forward is to head north. We see a ramp made from broken concrete, and spray painted upon it is one of Ulysses' red marks. Crouching down to activate our Riot Gear's night vision, we can try to peer over and be stealthy, but Eddie attracts some unwanted attention. When dead, we can loot the corpses, where we find a new enemy outfit, the Marked Trooper Armor. This is a medium armor that has 8 DT, and it grants +2 to guns and +1 to endurance. It looks like it's been made from NCR armor, and like the scout armor we examined in yesterday's episode, it too is reinforced with more road signs. We find signs that say, "No parking anytime," Pinefall, Detroit Street, and Pine Falls Drive. After looting the enemies, we see that we've discovered the Marked Men Supply Outpost, and we find quite a store of riches here. There's a truck to the southwest. In the back, we find military crates, metal boxes. In the metal box, we find a warehouse stash key. We'll have to save this for later. And a mattress at the very end in case we want to sleep. Heading out, we find another nuclear warhead sitting on a big crate. We need to keep a mental inventory of these for when we get our laser detonator. We see a truck tipped nearly on its end with a bunch of crates spilling out. We can loot MREs on the ground, and then we can loot these military shipping crates. To the right of this, we find one more tipped over truck. There is a ramp leading inside where we can loot more explosives crates. There's a small box filled with rocket canisters to the southwest, and at the very end, another bedroll to sleep. Back out, we pass by a Marked Man campfire and head down an alley to the north. Visibility is poor. It's so dark, and this wind is just kicking up all the dust and ash. Crouching down with the riot helm on makes it a little easier to see. On the western side of this alleyway, we find a rubble ramp that leads to the second floor of a ruined building. Here we find a military shipping crate and a ramp leading down to more rubble. We can clamber across the rubble until we find a small pile next to another ledge on the second floor. If we leap atop it, we can find a stash of goods hiding beneath a wrecked car. Here we can loot a shipping crate, a metal box, an auto-eject stim pack on the ground, and a first aid kit. Back down to the alley. We see that the alley ends at a road going west and east. Looks like the west goes back around to where we've been, so instead we'll head east. The eastern road ends at a big brick building, and on the wall we find some of Ulysses' blue graffiti, which means there must be some treasures nearby. We can unlock the gate here using the warehouse stash key we found in the metal box in the back of the truck. This leads us to a small little nook with a big fire roaring in a barrel. Here we find another Ralphie poster on a wall, and we can loot 2 military shipping crates. On a shelf to the west, we find another one of Ulysses' logs, Y1721.
Emptiness here, like the sands of the great salt lake, echoed. The beating in the divide sky, like storm drums of the white legs. Ran with them on the salt beds at Caesar's command. Cut the throats of the 2-headed bear, cut all communities off. Use storm, sky, disease, fire, starvation, and the violence of the ignorant to ruin all who could, might stand against him. But the Whitelegs, they couldn't live on their own like most scavengers, so gave them purpose, turned their hunger into a weapon. The wall of New Canaan, too high for Caesar, too proud maybe, or maybe something there from his past that needed killing. Memory of Graham. Help them dig out Canaan's supply caches and other secrets the sands hid. Bunkers filled with powered weapons even the Brotherhood might desire. They call these new weapons storm drums in the firing of shells. Taught them the power in the casings to channel the spirits in their guns. Me, they called me the flag bearer. Glory in my hand, in my staff that still bore the weight of the old world, just as the symbol on my back did. I learned their weapons as a means of respect, and when it came their turn to pay respect to me, history came rushing back. Can't escape what's been done. History's there, no matter how far you walk.
So Ulysses is responsible for arming the Whitelegs. If you recall from my series on the Honest Hearts DLC, the primary enemies from that DLC was the Whitelegs tribe. They were attacking the Sorrows. They were attacking the Dark Horses. They had already attacked New Canaan, killed Daniel's pastor, and displaced that entire community. They would have done the same to the Sorrows and the Dead Horses if not for the intervention of Joshua Graham and the courier. And Ulysses is responsible for all of this. If not for Ulysses, the Whitelegs would have never uncovered the cache of automatic weapons they used against the Sorrows. And we learned that he did so at Caesar's command. Ulysses must, at one time, have been part of the Legion. A Frumentari, perhaps? The Frumentari were spies. It could have been that Ulysses was masquerading as a courier. It's clear why Caesar wanted New Canaan destroyed, to erase the memory of where he came from, to get rid of all of those who might remember who he once was, and of course, to possibly track down and get revenge upon Joshua Graham for losing the battle at Hoover Dam. Sounds like Caesar used Ulysses as a big part of that. He sent Ulysses to the Whitelegs, promising them admission into the Legion if only they could kill the New Canaanites. But this is a dead end, so our only path forward is to go back from where we came. By now it's finally daylight. It's a little easier to see. We can head west down the road, and we pass on our right another big stack of vehicles blocking our path. In the back of one of the trucks we find another nuclear warhead. And we see a big red stamp from Ulysses, meaning that danger lies on the other side of this rubble wall. But for now that path is blocked, so we must head southwest and up the road. Here we find a small ledge to the north. Sneaking on up, we see a small campfire here, and on a brick wall we find the words, "Everyone is gone." Was that done by Ulysses? Well, it must have been. Who else would have spray painted that? After looting a box here, we see that this path is also blocked with cars, so turning around, we can head back to the road, head up a small rubble ramp into the back of a truck. We pass some skeletons, and at the very end loot 3 military shipping crates. Heading back out to the road, we can go west through the gate, and then head all the way back up to that elevated platform where we found the headquarters, to walk through the gate, back up the rubble ramp to the ruined building overlooking the road. We can reach the ground by hopping down some rubble to the north. Here we find an abandoned marked man camp with gore and trash everywhere. We find 2 ammo canisters embedded in the ground here. Walking southeast, we see a marked man perched on top of a ruin. Well, I'm not sure why he was shooting flares at me. It said I was hidden while crouched, but nevertheless I ended up killing him. Creeping out into the street, we don't see any other enemies. We see a rubble ramp which leads up into this building, but instead of going up for now, I want to explore behind it. So heading down to the ground, we can go east and then south, around back behind the building. Here we find an alleyway to the west, and we can loot the corpse of the marked man we sniped earlier. On his body, we find Blade of the West. Blade of the West is a stronger version of the bumper sword. It's stronger even than its counterpart, Blade of the East. wielded by Legate Lanius. It does 60 damage, which is 5 less than Blade of the East, but because it's a much faster weapon dealing 2.13 attacks per second compared to the East's 1.58, it has a much higher DPS, a DPS of 127.9 compared to 104.6. The only benefit East has over West is a bleed effect that does 2 damage over 10 seconds. Also on his body is Red Glare. Red Glare is a unique rocket launcher from Lonesome Road. In fact, it is this weapon that we saw depicted in the schematics that we discovered in the Hopeville missile silo. It looks like the military did indeed bring this weapon into production. Red Glare is a fully automatic rocket launcher. It fires incredibly quickly, and it has a scope, which makes it effective both at mid and long ranges. The rockets have a huge splash radius, making it an incredibly effective weapon for firing at large groups of enemies. It can deal 4 attacks per second, and in VATS costs 25 AP per attack. Each attack does 20 damage plus 40 modified by the player's explosive skill. Thus, the lowest amount of DPS it can do is 240, and the highest, with all related perks, is 449, making it one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game. It is also by far the most valuable weapon in the game. When fully repaired and upgraded, Red Glare is worth 46,500 caps. At last, we finally have something that can use all those rockets we've been looting. We'll continue exploring the perimeter of these ruined buildings before we head on up. Continuing south, we see another Ralphie poster on a wall in an alleyway. Heading down the alleyway leads back out to the road. Thankfully, we don't see any enemies out here yet. Going back, we can go through a doorway into one of these buildings. This must have been a hardware store at one time. Heading behind the counter, we can go into an employee bathroom to loot a tool cabinet where we can find some nails. Back out into the main shopping floor, we find a display counter with bobby pins and a cooler filled with energy cells, electron charge packs, 357 Magnum rounds, 10mm rounds, 12 gauge rounds, and 2 ammo containers. Using the stairs in this building, we can climb on up to the second floor. Against the western wall, we can loot an average locked gun case. Inside, we can find a hunting rifle. Turning south, we can leap upon the ruin of this building's wall and then use it to jump across to the ledge on the final building. From here, we can wind around to a small lip of this building where we can loot 1 military crate. But this is a dead end, so we can turn back around and leap back across to the northern building. And then we can climb up a rebel ramp to find that perch upon which stood that marked man whom we sniped earlier. This ramp leads across the alleyway to the northern building. Here we find a number of containers, including a military crate and a duffel bag, and then crossing another alley using some concrete slabs, we can head to the next building rooftop. Here we find another Red Glare, and in a wrecked crate to the northeast, we can loot some rocket canisters, and at last, we find the laser detonator. You have found the laser detonator Ulysses spoke of, a piece of pre-war tech that can detonate the nuclear warheads scattered around the Lonesome Road. You can use it to open new paths, kill your enemies from afar, or even discover secret loot caches. Just point it at the warhead, hold down the trigger, and watch the explosion. If what Ulysses said is true, you'll need this to advance, which means there must be a warhead blocking the way forward. You'll need to find the correct warhead and detonate it. After looting the laser detonator, we can loot a few more rockets and rocket canisters surrounding us. But turning around, we see flares. Heading to the building's edge, we come under fire from a group of marked men. I had Red Glare equipped. I didn't have time to switch weapons, but it was the perfect opportunity to try this sucker out. I think I could get used to this. Though I do go through rockets pretty quickly, so we'll save this for special occasions. To leave this rooftop, we can go down some concrete to the north, which brings us to the second level of this ruined house. To the south, we find more graffiti. Dead. Okay. We can loot an explosives crate in the northeast corner, and then another one on top of a bookshelf to the southwest. In a small room under the stairs, we find a bedroll to sleep and a first aid box. We can then head down the rebel ramp to the road. After looting all the marked men, we can follow the road all the way to the south. We see that we are on the other side of that big stack of cars that we saw from the military base. And sure enough, in the back of this truck, we see that same nuclear warhead we saw earlier. Well, might as well try this laser detonator out. After looting some jet on the ground near to a skull, we can back up a bit to give some space between ourselves and the warhead. Let's see exactly how far back do we need to be. Well, doing a quick save just in case, we can stand reasonably far away and test this out. Whoops, looks like that wasn't far enough. Trying again, let's back up even farther. There we go. After detonating this nuclear warhead, we see that our quest log updates, and checking out our map, we find a new destination. The blast has cleared these wrecked cars, and we can now walk through the road to the military base. Before we move on to the next map marker, we've got a lot of nuclear warheads to detonate. We passed by so many of them before we got this laser detonator. I'm sure we've missed quite a lot. Heading all the way back to that gas station, we can detonate the very first warhead we found. Upon doing so, we see that we've revealed a door to the Hopeville women's barracks. Inside, we see all of the mattresses turned up on their end, and a big sandbag barricade to the southeast. Turning left, we can loot a stim pack in the hand of a skeleton and one footlocker. Moving east, we find ammunition on the ground next to some ammunition boxes behind the sandbag barricade, and a few caps laying out next to a checkerboard. As we enter the southern door into the bathroom, marked men race through the front door. This guy was wielding a Gatling laser, and he was wearing marked tribal armor. The marked tribal armor is a more heavily armored version of the scout and patrol armor. It appears to be made from legionary armor. This suit grants us a DT of 10 and +2 to melee weapons and +1 to strength. Like many of the marked armors we've found so far, it has been reinforced with road signs. On the right gauntlet, we see a warning sign, "Watch for falling rocks." The other guy was also wearing the tribal armor and was wielding a plasma caster. Holy cow. Back into the bathroom, we find rocket canisters in some boxes, bobby pins in the sink, ammunition and ammo boxes in the southeastern corner, and a first aid kit on the wall. And hiding beneath a small scorched book on an end table near a stall is a copy of Grognak the Barbarian. There's a locker to the west, which has more U.S. Army combat armor inside. And before we go, we can activate another Ralphie poster on the southwestern wall. Since we're so close to the Hopeville missile silo, we can head inside to access the commissary. Here we can purchase 3 Red Glare weapon mods: Red Glare Alpha Strike, the Red Glare Auto Launcher, and Red Glare Far Sighting. Upon purchasing all 3 upgrades for Red Glare, we complete the challenge Rocket's Red Glare, and we earn an achievement. Red Glare Alpha Strike increases rocket speed by 200%. The auto launcher increases the fire rate by 25%, and the far sighting increases its zoom to 4.35 magnification. The next warhead was down in that marked men's supply outpost. We remember it was sitting on top of a crate. Making sure we stand as far back as we can level the laser detonator at it. Disappointingly, detonating this one doesn't really do anything. It doesn't reveal any new loot, and it doesn't open any paths before us. However, it does help us along our way to completing the challenge, Warhead Hunter. Detonate all warheads in the Divide. There are 30 in total. We just detonated number 3. There was one more warhead we discovered that we need to detonate. Heading down the alleyway from this point back out to the road that led to that one nook where we found Ulysses' holotape, we head west down the road again until we see the nuclear warhead sitting amongst a bunch of vehicle rubble. Stepping back a safe distance, we can detonate it. And upon doing so, we get rushed by marked men. When the marked men who charged us are dead, we see more moving around beyond the fire. We can pull out our brush gun to try and snipe them from afar. With the marked men dead, we can move forward. We see that one of the marked men we killed was a mini-boss named Blister. On his corpse is a unique helmet item called the Marked Beast Helmet. This is a crude metal helmet beaten from scrap. It has a DT of 3 and grants plus 10 to energy resistance and plus 2 to energy weapons. It has the distinction of being the only armor piece that increases energy resistance. The Marked Beast helmet can be repaired with combat helmets. Blister was also wearing a suit of Marked Patrol armor. This is a more advanced suit of Marked Man armor. It grants a DT of 10 and plus 2 to energy weapons and plus 1 to perception. It's a medium piece of armor. It looks like it's been made from NCR Ranger Patrol armor. Like all Marked Men armor, it's been reinforced with road signs. On the back, we find a big Solitaire gas station sign. There's a stop sign affixed to the left thigh. The right shoulder is repaired with another Solitaire gas station sign and a Hope Street sign, and the right shin is reinforced with more Hope Street signs. Creeping forward down the road, we discover the Marked Men base. We can walk up a scrap ramp on top of a fire truck and then take it northwest, where we can climb another ramp up to a window leading into the ruin. We can loot one crate along the northwestern ledge, and here we find a unique structure. Looks like some sort of Marked Man hovel constructed from cinder blocks. We don't find anything interesting in these, but heading east we find 2 ammo crates and 1 military crate, but that's it for this level. So heading down to the bottom floor, we find 2 more of those makeshift hovels, and in a bathtub we find 2 rocket canisters. Inside one of the hovels is an ammunition box, but that's it for the ground floor. So we can then head east to scale some steps on the opposite side of this building. Here we just find 2 more military shipping crates, on top of which are more rocket canisters. There's another hovel right next to these with an ammunition box inside. Our path continues across a bridge to the east, but this bridge is blocked up by more ruined cars, and on top of one is another nuclear warhead. Backing up and making sure we have just enough distance, we can pull out our laser detonator to detonate the warhead. When the mushroom cloud dissipates, we can walk forward across the bridge, only to discover that we've completely destroyed the bridge. There is just enough rubble left, however, that it forms a ramp to the other side, and on the other side, we discover the entrance to the collapsed overpass tunnel. Before heading inside, we can explore this ruin for loot. Scaling a ramp to the southwest, we find 1 military crate hanging out on a ruined floor, and inside we find a shoulder-mounted machine gun. This machine gun is brand new to Lonesome Road. It thankfully uses 10mm ammunition, which is plentiful and easy to come by. It does 30 damage per attack, but it attacks so quickly that its DPS is a whopping 210 before any perks come into consideration. It's a beautiful looking weapon, and as the name suggests, it mounts comfortably on the shoulder. There are 3 weapon mods we can purchase for this sucker from the commissary. A shoulder-mounted machine gun mechanical upgrade, which increases weapon condition by 25%, a recoil compensator, which reduces spread by 0.2, and an extended magazine, which increases maximum ammunition capacity by 15. Heading back to the road, if we hop down to the northwest and turn southeast, we can wedge our way underneath this big rubble pile we just recently made to find a huge stack of military shipping crates. With that, we fully explore Hopeville. We loot every corner, and we walk away with its pre-war riches. But we've explored only a fraction of the divide. Heading back to the tunnel entrance, we find Ulysses' graffiti, and it's white, telling us that our path forward lies beyond this tunnel. We learned something horrible about Ulysses today, that he was responsible for teaching and arming the Whitelegs, and that he bears much of the blame for the destruction of New Canaan. He ended his holotape by saying that the Whitelegs attempted to honor him in some way, but the tone in his voice as he said it gave us the impression that he wasn't pleased with the manner in which they chose to do so. How did the Whitelegs try to honor Ulysses, and why didn't Ulysses like it? Will we ever be able to confront him for his role in the destruction of New Canaan? To find out, tune in tomorrow morning for the next episode. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week on a wide range of topics spanning all of the Fallout games, but this week I'm dedicating to the Lonesome Road DLC of Fallout New Vegas. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop, folks. End of Dungeon Steamer Trunk. You can find this shirt in a wide array of colors and in a variety of sizes on my shop. I've also got a bunch of other designs, so if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook to keep up to date with all Oxhorn news, and if you like what I do, and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so grateful that you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, for episode 3 of Lonesome Road.